UFC Fight Night, Vettori versus Cannonier. We have a very solid card coming up this weekend, taking place in the Apex. This is my third, fourth time trying to film this video because it is late where I'm at and I'm quite tired, but we march on. So without further ado, let's get right into this one. We're going to start with the first fight on the card, which is Zach Palga versus Modestas Bukauskas. Zach Palga is 1-1 in the UFC. Lost the Ultimate Fighter finale to Muhammad Usman and won his most recent fight versus Jordan Wright. He's the underdog in this one at plus 165. Modestas Bukauskas is the 2-1 favorite in this one. He is 2-3 in the UFC. Bukauskas won his debut fight in the UFC. Then his career kind of got derailed when he took an oblique kick to Khalil Roundtree, tore his knee up, really derailed his whole career where he was at. There's a lot of discourse in the MMA community regarding should those kicks be banned or not. I'm of the mind that if you throw one with the intent to injure, which I'm not saying Roundtree did at all, I think that should be very illegal. Do they ban the kick altogether? I think it wouldn't be the worst idea, although are there really that many instances of this happening? I don't know. Also, why is it called an oblique kick if your obliques are like on your sides? So maybe because you throw it sideways, maybe? I don't know. That just kind of clicked for me, but could be wrong. Nonetheless, Bukauskas then recently went to Cage Warriors, won a belt there, came back to the UFC, beat Tyson Pedro most recently, looked good doing it. He's a guy who's a good counter puncher. He can fight well moving forwards or moving backwards. Can lull you in and then hit you with a hard counter. He's a really strong guy. He's got good grappling. He can get up if he gets taken down, which I think Palga is going to look to do. Palga's got that football background. He was a fullback. He's built like a fullback, that's for sure. And he fights like what you would think a fullback in the NFL, how they would fight. He likes just full steam ahead, running at people, shoving them up against the cage. A lot of people, including myself, think he could have had a more convincing win against Jordan Wright most recently. Really, a lot of people, I would have liked to see him get a finish in that fight, but a win's a win. He looked solid doing it, but I don't see him being able to employ the same strategy in this one. Bukauskas is just too strong, I think, and too good of a grappler and in the clinch game to let him just get pushed up against the fence. So I think Palga was going to get frustrated from that, and this fight's going to take place on the feet where Bukauskas is a lot more experienced and sharp, and I think that's going to be a recipe for disaster for Palga. I think Bukauskas finds a KO in this fight. But looking forward to this one. Palga definitely could have improved a lot, could be constantly improving just given his relative inexperience in the sport. So will be really interesting to see how he evolves. Next up, we got a flyweight fight. We got Zhumagulov versus Felipe Bunez. I'm going to call him Gulov because I cannot pronounce his name that well, just at all. It just throws me off. My mouth just stops working. So just know that I can say it, but we're going Gulov. I'm going to just refer to him as Gulov now. He's a very underrated flyweight. He's 1-4 in his last 5 fights. He is the minus 165 favorite in this fight versus Felipe Bunez, who's making his UFC debut. Gulov has been in there with a lot of the top guys in that division. He's had close losses to Charles Johnson, Jeff Molina. Got KO'd by Manel Kape, but a lot of those decisions, people think that he should have gotten the nod. He's definitely a guy who the judges always seem to go the other way against. Felipe Bunes, on the other hand, I'm not even sure this guy exists. I know that sometimes how like the names work out with a lot of these Brazilian guys making their UFC debuts is like they go like under different names or something, or there's some sort of thing with their names that gets lost in translation. This dude is off the grid. Couldn't find a single video about him. Don't really care. I'm taking him by decision. Gulov, the dude just gets robbed, and I don't see why that doesn't happen again here. I feel for the guy, and I think he's such an underrated personality. He's funny as hell. He's got I don't even know what you call that whack-ass haircut, like a bucket cut or whatever. The dude's just goofy, and he's a fun personality, but dude gets robbed. I think he gets robbed in this one. Definitely is going to dominate the fight and just find a way to lose it on the cards. Next up, we're going to the welterweights. We got Nicholas Dalby versus Muslim Salikov. Dalby is 4-1-1 in the UFC. He's got wins over Worley Alves, Claudio Silva, and a loss versus Tim Means. Muslim Salikov, he's got a win over Andre Fialho most recently, and win over Francisco Trinaldo in the past, and a loss to Yijin Liang. Salikov is the -190 favorite in this fight, with Dalby being a +160 underdog. These are two older guys. I think they're 38 and 39. Dalby, despite being older, is a guy who likes to put the pace on. He's got a really solid gas tank, at least we saw in his most recent fight. He was able to put out a lot of output over 3 rounds and have enough energy to mix in some grappling. He throws a lot of punches, whereas Salikov, on the other hand, is the much cleaner striker. The dude is the king of kung fu. He throws spinning kicks, lightning fast. I think he's up there for most unassuming fighter on the roster. Like, you look at him and you just would not think that this dude was a professional fighter, just by the looks of him, and his physique wise too. Like, dude is just not built like some of these other fighters, but he proves that doesn't mean a thing. He's got as much dexterity, flexibility, and quickness as really anyone, especially for his age. Dalby has never been KO'd in his career, and if this fight goes the distance, he could have a chance to just sort of put the pace on Salikov and just beat him on just volume. But I think he leaves himself open enough for Salikov to land the more cleaner shots in this one. I think Salikov will be able to get some knockdowns to secure rounds, and I think he'll get the decision win. For the lightweights, I've skipped some fights on the prelims, but I just do not care about those, and just not giving it my time right now, to be honest. If this was a better card, I would absolutely go over the entire thing, but I'm also just don't know enough about some of those guys to really confidently make any picks. But let's go to the lightweights. We got Manuel Torres versus Nicholas Moda. Torres is the -170 favorite in this one, with Moda being a +140 underdog. Torres is 1-0 in the UFC, with Moda being 1-1, with a win over Cameron Van Camp and a loss to Jim Miller. Manuel Torres' sole win in the UFC comes against Frank Camacho, but I think he won his Dana White Contender Series debut. Torres is a really flashy fighter. He's looking for a KO. He's throwing 100% of himself into every shot. He throws these hooks like from all the way, like, the dude just winds up so much. So if they land hard. But I think just how wide some of his striking is and how just like not tight it is, I think that's going to get him in some trouble. Moda is a really good striker. He got KO'd by Jim Miller in a fight that Jim Miller just, his experience showed. He was able to just leg kick Moda enough to open him up and then land one of his own shots. Even in that fight, Moda found a way to get to Jim Miller's chin, and it was a miracle that Jim Miller didn't go down from the shot that he got hit with. So, yes, he does have that recent KO loss, but Jim Miller's been knocking everybody out, so I'm not even going to think too deep into that. I think Moda's just the tighter, more concise striker, and I think Torres is going to be trying a little too hard to get the KO in this one, just throwing 100% of himself, and I think he's just going to wind up too much, and Moda's just going to meet, his hands are just going to land a lot quicker than Torres is, and I think he finds a finish in this one. So Moda by KO is the pick. Featherweight fight is up next between Pat Sabatini and Lucas Almeida. Sabatini is the minus 175 favorite in this one, with Almeida being a plus 140 underdog. Sabatini is 4-1 in his last 5 fights. Some of his notable wins are versus Tucker Lutz and Jamal Emmers. His most recent fight, though, is a loss versus Damon Jackson. That loss versus Damon Jackson, I mean, that was like some stuff out of a movie. Damon Jackson's brother had passed away the week prior, tragically, and he just came in so inspired. Sabatini, I mean, I almost feel for him because he had to be like, he had to be just like, I stand no chance against this guy. Like he was just, Damon Jackson was just different that night. He landed a crazy front head kick on Sabatini, wobbled him really bad, found the way to get the finish. There was just there was no scenario where Damon Jackson was losing that fight. It was just meant to be. So I recommend watching that fight just to see the emotion from Damon Jackson in that one. It's very inspirational, but that's neither here nor there. Sabatini, besides that, has had a very good run in the UFC as of late. Almeida, on the other hand, lost his Contender Series bout versus Zell Huber, went and got a win in another promotion, and now he's back. Now he made his way back in the UFC and got a win, got a KO win. Almeida is a very solid striker. He throws really hard punches, and he's quick. His hands are very fast, snappy, as the announcers were referring to it. But Sabatini is the clear better grappler out of these two. Almeida has, just looking at his previous fights, been taken down pretty easily, and if that's not something he's improved drastically on, I think Sabatini just takes him down and keeps him down. And so I think he can just wrestle his way to a decision win, so that's going to be the pick, Sabatini by decision. The wrestling is just going to be too much for Lucas Almeida. A couple of middleweights are up next, Armen Petrosyan and Christian Leroy Duncan. Armen Petrosyan is the plus 130 underdog, with CLD being the minus 160 favorite. Petrosyan is 2-1 in the UFC with CLD. He's 1-0, but really there's a fat asterisk next to that one because he was fighting Todorovic, and he just Todorovic just non-contact, pretty much injury, blew his knee out. CLD was looking pretty impressive up to that point. His striking was looking clean. He was strong in the clinches. So I don't doubt that he was on his way to winning that fight, but you really can't say for sure. Petrosyan, he's got win over AJ Dobson. He lost to Caio Borraio. Obviously that loss has aged really well. Borraio is on his way to being a major contender in the division. Petrosian's got clean striking, throws a lot of feints, and just sort of pokes people from the outside, mixing in kicks. He's just a clean striker, whereas CLD, on the other hand, is probably the less proven of the two, just not having the UFC competition level that Petrosian has fought a few times against. CLD, I think, was beating up majority tomato cans in the UK, where he's from, but looking very impressive doing it. He's a guy who's got a lot of power, and the big thing in this fight for me is this taking place in the Apex. If this was a more traditional, if this was taking place in a traditional cage, you know, in the O2, for example, where I think CLD's last fight was at, I'd be more hesitant to take CLD. I think Petrosian, that would benefit him a lot, being able to keep his distance and just sort of leg kick and fight that way, just a more like calm, technical striking affair. But with the smaller cage and these being some bigger dudes, I think that spells trouble for Petrosian. I think it's going to force him to engage up close versus CLD, and I think CLD is going to be able to get Petrosian up against the cage more easily, and I think he's going to have a chance to land harder shots on the inside. And I think the power advantage is clearly with CLD in this one. So for that reason, I think CLD is going to get a KO win in that fight. The co-main event is between Arman Tsarukyan and Joaquim Silva. I want to say Tsarukyan was scheduled to fight Moicano originally. Moicano pulled out, and Silva was found on short notice to take this fight. Dude's a psychopath, if you ask me, because I think Arman Tsarukyan is one of the most talented guys, not only in this division, but in the UFC. I think he dominates this fight. I mean, we'll quickly go over Silva's resume. He's got wins versus Jesse Ronson and Jared Gordon, and losses against Ricky Glenn and like Nasrat. You know, not schmucks, but I mean, let's be real. He's not beating Tsarukyan. So let's get that out of the way. I think Tsarukyan KOs him. Silva's a guy who finds a way to either win or lose by KO. So I think Tsarukyan's going to win this one by KO. I'm going to use the rest of this time to just go over why I am so high on Tsarukyan and his potential. I think he's the best fighter outside of the top 5 in any division, okay? That's first and foremost. Bold claim. I mean, I don't know who else could really contend with him for that accomplishment. I mean, yeah, off the top of my head, I mean, there's really nobody I can even think of who has a claim to that outside of him. Like, who's a guy who's just super unappreciated. Tsarukyan's that guy to me. He's a guy who, if he had gotten the nod on the cards versus Gamrot, which he definitely should have. He got a knockdown versus Gamrot, and the judges still gave the round to Gamrot, I think, because they just didn't even realize that it was a knockdown. I think he could have been in line for a title shot. If not now, then he would be like pretty much guaranteed next up. With that loss versus Gamrot, he's had to sort of now kind of take whatever fight they'll give him, and I don't think anyone wants to fight him. That's why he couldn't even get Moicano to sign to stay on this one. Or, I mean, maybe he was injured, but I think Moicano is doing the smart thing by ducking this fight. I think, honestly, Arman has the best chances of anyone of beating Islam Makhachev today. Okay? I'll say it again. I think Tsarukyan has the best chances of beating Islam today, and that includes Charles. That includes Beneil. that includes Poirier. I really think that he just matches up the most against Islam. He had his UFC debut against Islam and really gave him a run for his money. By the end of the fight, Islam's experience was showing, and he just was winning the grappling exchanges at the end. But Arman was literally, I think, 22 years old. And even back then, you could see that strength-wise, he was like, he could keep up with Islam purely just from like a physicality standpoint. And that's, 3-4 years ago. Now he's living in Thailand, probably, got a great nutritionist. And, I mean, the guy, he's only getting stronger, only getting more skilled. His striking's underrated. He has some of the hardest kicks in the division. Great power in his hand, and his wrestling really is second to, I'm not going to say second to none, but second to Islam. Let's call it that. I think his wrestling is better than Gamrot. His gas tank gave out a little earlier, and that's why he lost some of those grappling exchanges. So I'll hop off him now, but, you can take your receipts now. Arman will be champion by end of 2024. I'll say that right now on the record. Okay, now we have the main event. A middleweight fight, Marvin Vettori versus Jared Cannonier. Vettori is the -125 favorite in this one. Cannonier just a slight underdog. Quick resume check. Vettori 2-3 in his last 5. He's got wins over Roman Dolidze, or 3-2 in his last 5 rather. Wins over Dolidze, Paulo Costa, Holland, and he's got losses to Whitaker and Izzy. Cannonier, on the other hand, he's got wins versus Strickland, Brunson, and Gastelum. Losses to Izzy and Whitaker, so they both have the same shared losses between the two of their last 5. Cannonier, he's a guy who probably had the greatest weight class shift ever. You all probably know the story. Started out as a heavyweight, literally unrecognizable from what he is now. Like, the dude had a different face. I'm not entirely convinced that this is the same dude. Didn't have the most success at heavyweight, dropped down to light heavyweight, found out that he could still squeeze a few pounds out and make 185, and it just completely revitalized his career. Started knocking people out. His power carried so well to the lower weight, and he just got so much quicker, and that has allowed him to had as much success as he's had. Given his age, he's 39. Definitely doesn't look his age, but that is something to definitely keep tabs on. How well is he going to keep handling this weight cut as he ages? There's nothing to suggest that he won't be able to do it. I mean, he's been doing it for a while. He's older, more mature. The guy is just, you can tell he's just a smart, tactical guy, like always, always thinking 2 steps ahead in the cage and even out of the cage, just well composed. Listening to interviews, just very calm and collected. On the other hand, we have Marvin Vettori. He's a guy who's definitely leaned on his grappling more as of late. That's kind of been his greatest attribute to date. That partnered with his really good gas tank, he's been able to, just control guys and win fights that way. Just sort of take him down, muscle him, and land some ground and pound and win rounds. His striking is okay. I mean, he kind of got exposed versus Whitaker, but you can say that about a lot of people. I think Cannonier, even though his striking is definitely better than Vettori's, I think Vettori is skilled enough to at least hang in there with Cannonier, at least enough for him to look for his takedowns and fight in the clinch. Vettori also just seems to have more success against like the power strikers, I guess you could say. Dolidze, for example, he handled his power very well. Vettori's got an iron chin for sure. I see Vettori struggling early to score a takedown while Cannonier's fresh. But as the fight progresses, I think his gas tank will hold up a bit better than Cannonier's. Vettori just being the younger guy at 29 and him just having great cardio. One interesting factor to look out for, though, in regards to grappling is the sweat effect. And I'm being dead serious about this, but Cannonier, top 5 sweaty dude in the UFC. The guy is just dripping in it by the end of his fights. So, that alone could help him out in these grappling exchanges. Vettori will, grab his Cannonier's torso, and Cannonier will just slip right out from under him. So that's going to be something to look out for. If I was Vettori, I'd be I'd be in the sparring room, getting oiled up to prepare for that, his sparring partners, because that's definitely going to be a factor in this one. But I think Vettori finds a way around that, leans on his grappling. His stand-up's definitely improving. There's a video coming out of him from Bangkok, every other week. So the dude's working on his Muay Thai, and I think he is constantly getting better. So Vettori, I see him getting the decision win in this one. With that is my breakdown for this weekend's Fight Night card. I hope you all enjoyed. If you have any differing opinions, definitely let me know. I suck at outros. If anyone has any good outro ideas, catchphrases, let me hear them. I will pick one comment outro to be my outro on the next video. That's a guarantee. So let's get these comments going if you're watching. But with that, that's all I got. I'm very tired. Peace.